Howdy from Texas! My name is Addison Soderquist, and although I've been raised in Texas for my entire life, I've never started saying howdy until recently when I became the loudest and proudest member of the class of 2027 Fighting Texas Aggies. I'm sincerely honored to have been selected not only for the BMW Hope Scholarship from the ESA Foundation, but to have been chosen to share my story with you today. Like I mentioned, I was born and raised in Texas, East Texas specifically. I'm an only child and live with both my parents, Ryan and April Soderquist. They would probably tell you that I have filled the only child role well and kept them hopping my entire life from one surprise after another, it seems like. As a child, I played everything, from being the only girl on the boys' t-ball team to soccer, cheer, gymnastics, swimming, and dance. It was dance that I took to, and no surprise since I came into this world seemingly with rhythm, more on that later, but I continue to enjoy that sport, still. I've been in studio dance since I was 2 years old and just finished my senior year of competitive dance. From here, I'm looking forward to joining the Dance Art Society at Texas A&M and getting back to the expression and enjoyment of performance rather than the purpose of winning. Educationally, I feel like I've been blessed with many opportunities from preschool all throughout high school graduation, in some ways that I didn't even realize until recently. For instance, I just reconnected with a friend this last year that I had not seen since we were four and in our very first class together. I was quiet, a serious 4-year-old, watching this rambunctious boy play and get into trouble from a safe distance. Now that I think of it, not much has changed since then. On top of friendships, my parents enrolled me in a dual language program where I spent half my days learning in English and the other half learning in Spanish for all of my first five grade levels. I'm proud to say that as a recent 2023 summa cum laude graduate, I'm not only bilingual, but I truly appreciate diversity in culture and know that this will continue to play an important role in my studies and future goals. Also, that preschool year was significant for me medically. That was the year that my parents jokingly say that I solidified my place in the family as an only child. We went on a family vacation to the happiest place on earth. As a reserved kind of princess, my parents reminded me that I became a daredevil, belling laughing at the thrills of my first roller coasters. I was barely tall enough to get to ride, but I remember feeling like a big kid having the time of my life. Turns out, a few days after we got home, that trip would be the cause of my first ambulance transport, the meeting of the best neurosurgeon that I would call Prince Dowser, and like I said, the decision that I was more than enough as an only child. It was the scariest thing my parents have ever dealt with so far. Long story short, one of my favorite roller coasters had caused a whiplash effect, and a clot had been forming at the top of my spine. My face had started to droop, one of my pupils had started to shrink to the size of a pinhead, and although I never said it hurt, I kept biting my lip in pain. Thankfully and miraculously, the clot was removed, and I was labeled the roller coaster girl by one of the best neurosurgeons in the nation. And no, I haven't ridden a roller coaster since. I recovered, got to go home, see my pre-K friends, and start kindergarten. I enjoyed school and learning Spanish, and I don't know if I mentioned this yet, but both of my parents are educators. Actually, most of my family works in education. My mom has been everything from a high school teacher to an instructional coach, a digital learning specialist, and a principal. My dad is a high school football coach, defense specifically. Defense wins ball games, so worth mentioning. Anyway, I'm an August 18th birthday, so one of the youngest in my class. As educators at the end of my kindergarten year, my parents wanted to make sure that I was ready to move forward at school. The teachers assured my parents I was ready and mature enough, and so I went on to first grade. Then again, at the end of my first grade, although I was performing well, my mom questioned my readiness again. Just like before, she was told that I was ready to move forward, that sometimes I appeared to zone out or daydream, but that wasn't uncommon for kids my age. State testing starts in the third grade in Texas, and the academic scores were good, but the anxiety I started developing over school and testing was real. My parents always communicated with my teachers and tried to find answers to a question my mom didn't even know how to ask. They say a mother knows best, And I guess mine definitely did because finally, during my fifth grade year, an incident happened that made so many things make sense. The teacher described it as I almost froze. I was walking from my desk to turn in a paper and I was talking to the teacher, and in the middle of my sentence, I just froze. I stood there even when she called my name, and then after about 30 seconds, I shook my head, looked down at the paper I was holding, and confused, headed back to my own desk to sit down. I had forgotten what I was doing or saying. The teacher called my parents, and my pediatrician sent me back to the hospital where I had been for surgery 5 years earlier. After tons of kind of scary testing, it was determined that I had been having absent seizures, and we were told that actually because of the trauma from from when I was 4, it wasn't uncommon for them to develop. On top of that, I was labeled as ADHD and attentive, also apparently common and goes hand in hand with the epilepsy I was experiencing. As if the middle school years aren't hard enough, mine started with the struggles of getting the right epilepsy medication and then the best dosage. I was back to having to go to the neurologist regularly, and all of this change and the unknowns, or just the inability to really understand what was happening, made me a very anxious preteen. Dealing with the side effects of the medications was no fun at all. There were days my stomach just hurt and ached, and then there were times when I just couldn't hold my eyes open from the drowsiness. It seemed like so many days my mom would have to pick me up early from middle school, take me back to her office at the high school campus, and I would crash on a pallet in the corner on the floor while she tried to finish her duties for the day. With the effects of the medication, on top of the absent seizures themselves, 504 accommodations were put into place to help support my learning at school and make sure I had the tools I needed to be successful. Side note, I'll argue with anyone that my accommodations are actually good for any learner. I mean, who wouldn't benefit from earbuds to help with concentration and the removal of time restraints on quizzes, just to name a few? I've never been in a real world situation where I needed to label a map in 10 minutes, at least not yet. One thing I remember from learning that I was having seizures was telling my mom I just felt like I was missing time, like I might be listening to a friend or my teacher, and then all of a sudden the conversation would change or be over, and I just felt like I must have not been paying attention good enough. Sometimes I would even wonder if I had even responded to whomever I was talking to. But like I said, I was a quiet and serious 4 year old, and as a middle schooler, that remained the same. I wanted to fly under the radar and never let anyone know something might be wrong, so I wouldn't ever ask what I missed or what just happened, or even just for the person to repeat what they said. By the end of my eighth grade year, with over 2 years of the medicine doing what it was supposed to do, I felt like something was changing again. I didn't feel like I was having any seizures, but I was having some headaches and feeling shaky and jittery. All of a sudden, I really don't want to take the medication anymore. Now the doctors had told my parents that sometimes kids outgrew these kinds of seizures. So that is exactly what my parents prayed for. In May, to finish middle school, the neurologist agreed to wean me off the medication, monitor my progress, and follow up tests for signs and absent seizures. We knew I wouldn't be able to earn a driver's license with these seizures, and it would be reckless and dangerous to more than just to me to ignore them, so we closely watched and waited. We celebrated my 15th birthday with me earning a learner's permit for driving and seizure free for almost 2 years. That was in August, and it was an amazing feeling. In September of that same year, after a spring and summer where the world stood still and COVID 19 shut down school, I was diagnosed with autism. Just doing my part as an only child to keep my parents hopping. In all seriousness, this one was not a surprise. It was one of the things my mom was concerned about even when I was 4 years old. I didn't make up conversations with my dolls. I replayed conversations that I had observed at school that day. I was obsessed with animals and arranged my toys in lines by categories, rather than creatively playing with them. But I also had superpowers too. I'm observant way more than the common person and notice things like the color of shoestrings of random people in a room. And remember how I said I was born with rhythm? Actual truth. I would rock to the beat of a song Ray Charles' Hit the Road Jack was one of my favorites when I was barely old enough to sit up on my own. That rhythm got me into dance at an early age and kept me there. Dance has always been my safe place, the place where I feel most like myself. My neurologist actually told me that made perfect sense. With the autism, it's a release of emotion and expression and how I best relate to people through music and movement. But even with the epilepsy, I never had an absent seizure while dancing, and that's because my mind and body were so engaged physically, it almost occupied that part of my mind that would lose time. Since the newest diagnosis, I've learned to embrace and work to understand all of the uniqueness God has given me. I'm much more aware of my strengths and can more easily identify my struggles, which I believe is important for being able to find ways to take those struggles and turn them into something positive. Communication, for various reasons that you can see over the years, has been a struggle for me, but that is one I've decided to take by the horns. I mean, this may not be the best speech you've ever heard, but look at me, I'm talking to you now. Progress, I think. It's also the major I've chosen to pursue at Texas A&M. My goal is to earn a Bachelor of Arts in Telecommunications and Media Studies with an arts minor with a hope to one day create graphics and design social media campaigns for a large nonprofit or maybe for the hospital that took such amazing care of me during my childhood or a corporation. In my dream job, I would be able to work remotely and travel. I want to see more of the world and study the diversity and cultures of different areas to better be able to communicate. I plan to use my Spanish and to reach a wider audience and look forward to the doors and opportunities that lie ahead. This scholarship is such an absolute honor to receive. It not only helps pave the way for me to achieve my goals, but it takes some of the financial burden off my parents. I plan to work and continue to apply for scholarships throughout my college years, but just like they've always done, they are determined to provide me with the best experience, resources for success, and keep my focus minimal on the finances and more on handling all of the change and academic load coming my way. I told you already that they are both educators, and we know teachers don't become educators for the money. My parents are no different. I may be an only child, but my entire life has been filled with meeting their students and watching them reach out and guide, help, and finance when necessary. They have hearts of gold, and I hope that I will follow in their footsteps when I'm grown. I know my testimony to others will be different. We each have our own story, but I will be able to tell others of my journey, the struggles and the unknowns, and how your support systems can make all the difference in the world. My dad is a first generation high school graduate and went on to earn his master's of education. And now look at the support he has given me my entire life, along with my family. I consider this foundation to be a part of my support system now, like family, and will always, forever, be grateful. With sincerest appreciation to everyone who made the scholarship possible, your work matters. Thanks and gig 'em.